on white magic. I think this is class 95. We didn't know how long this class would be before we finish, but we're on the final rule, and we'll be right around probably 100 before we're done. Be kind of cool if we had 100 even, but who knows? We're talking about rule 15 here, and we left off talking about the esoteric sense. He says the esoteric sense is the main need of the aspirant at this time of world history. He says until aspirants have somewhat grasped it and can use it, they can never be part of the new group of world servers. They can never work as a white magician. These instructions will remain for them theoretical and mainly intellectual instead of being practical and effective. Now, there are a lot of students out there that study the Alice A. Bailey writings. And probably the question as you examine some of these is, are all the writings just theoretical for them, kind of intellectual exercise? But how many go beyond that and actually apply the principles? And to apply the principles, a person has to see the principles. And this is what a lot of people overlook, is they go into a lot of the details and memorize details and memorize different text, but overlook the principles. And the principles is where it's always at. And so he talks about the esoteric sense, he says, is the main need. Anybody got an idea of what he means when he talks about the esoteric sense? What is that? He says this is what the disciple needs more than anything. And a lot of them, he says, are missing it because they're concentrating on the technical things and missing the big picture. And the big picture, the disciple needs, and the esoteric sense. Anybody got an idea what he means when he talks about acquiring this?
Well, my view of it is you have to see that it is working out. You have to notice that these truths are making their way upon the scene in life. We see them coming through our own consciousness. We see the unfolding of the evolution of human consciousness. You have to be able to be these things and not just know them.
Okay.
I like to look at it as part of it, like we talk about it nowadays in electronics. We say it's in the cloud. I don't have to memorize. I don't have to memorize every detail, but I have to at times recognize these truths as I see them coming through me and showing up on TV and everywhere I look.
Yeah, yeah. Well, that's interesting where you say you don't need to memorize everything. Like, look at everything that happens in our body, just the beating of your heart, and think of all the technology and intelligence that goes into making your heart work. Now, fortunately for us, we don't have to even think about it. It just happens. And there's a lot of things we don't have to think about, but we can use. We can use different principles and ideas without knowing all the details about how they work, because it's below the threshold of our consciousness to the point to where our consciousness goes into a higher level that can use many things on a lower level. Okay, any other comments on what the esoteric sense is?
Yeah, I was going to say, JJ, that I feel it has something to do with an awareness of your higher self, because if you don't have the awareness of your higher self, then you're really just operating on a very basic and superficial level.
Okay, that's a really good point. Anything else?
Well, I think it has to do with the subjective underpinnings of the plan that the masters are working on fulfilling the higher will of God, just an awareness. Like Jill said, it starts with an understanding of your higher self, but it also extends into what the will of God is and how it's subjectively revealed to our higher self, and then connecting with that esoterically, so that it becomes a part of you. You know,
Okay.
you're living it.
Okay. Basically, all these points are really good. And basically, Tibetan divides humanity into two groups. One is the masses of humanity, and second, he calls them the new group of world servers. The new group of world servers is just really a small handful of people. How many, he doesn't tell us, you know, probably with the numbering and maybe the thousands or maybe even a million people or so, but in relation to the billions. And the main thing that separates them is the esoteric sense, and this is basically a sense of purpose. In other words, they're connected to their higher self to the extent that they have a sense of what needs to be done to fulfill the plan. Now, he talks about these new group of world servers that many of them are unaware that they are a member of the new group of world servers. Before they incarnated, they were aware that they would be them. But when they get down here, many of them just think they're just ordinary people. But they're beyond the ordinary, because as they're working and doing their jobs and intermingling with people, they have a sense of what he calls the esoteric sense, a sense of tuning in to higher will of what they need to do to fulfill their part to make the next step in spiritual evolution of the planet happen. Okay. And so that's basically what he means by the esoteric sense. They have a sense of higher will, and a lot of these new group of world servers on the lower levels that don't really understand who they are, a lot of them just don't think they're any different than anybody else. They kind of think, well, everybody kind of feels this way. Well, everybody doesn't, because the average person out there, instead of having the esoteric sense, he's thinking of everything he can do to satisfy his own ego, to further his own cause, to bring his own happiness, to take care of his own family, to take care of his own needs. And his attention is all on the basically on just taking care of the self. And a lot of the average people, you know, they will help other people and they're generous and things like this, but everything is circulating around their ego. And even those with goodwill, a lot of them don't have a sense of what needs to be done to fulfill the next step that God has in store for humanity as a whole. So this is what sets the new group of world servers in a different category, is they will have a sense of what truly needs to be done. Now, we look at our political parties and the tremendous division, and a lot of people can see a lot of illusion out there, and both sides have intent for good to be the result. But you can see a lot of people just don't have a sense of what really needs to be done, you know. And he says there's just a small handful that do this, and they are in a separate group in the fact that they're connected esoterically throughout the entire world. And for those of you with Mormon background, the Book of Mormon says there are two churches only. One is the Church of the Lamb of God, and the other is the Church of the Devil. And the difference between the two is the church, the invisible members of the Church of the Lamb of God seek for the establishment of Zion, which would be basically a situation where there's peace on earth, goodwill to men, the great new age that we're all anticipating happening. And those who are the members of the true invisible church, so to speak, will be those that seek to further higher will higher than themselves, and they're willing to make some personal sacrifice, especially sacrificing the ego in order to make that happen. And not too many people are willing to sacrifice what their own ego dictates to them. And but this is essential. Now he says, he points out, and we're going to go into more detail later, that a key ingredient to having this esoteric sense is that the person takes the viewpoint of the observer. From that point and attitude, you will direct the activities of the mind and the emotions and the energies which make physical expression possible and useful. So being the observer is the first main stage of obtaining this esoteric sense. And instead of being the observer, the average humanity that are not members of the new group of world servers, instead of being the observer, they identify with the lower ego. And the fact that everything they do is motivated by the ego and what the ego demands and what the ego thinks is good, what the ego thinks is evil. But then when the person learns to eventually detach and look at the situation as an observer, as if he's actually in a play and he's watching that play happen, so to speak, then he can see it from a different vantage point. You watch a movie, for instance, and the characters in the movie are entirely identified with the characters there. But when you are actually watching the movie, you can kind of see ahead of time what's going to happen. You can see that when the guy turns his back on the bad guy is really going to attack him. But the good guy just seems oblivious, you know. And you can see that, but the guy in the movie can't see it. Okay, well, the people, a lot of the people on this planet are like people in a movie, that they can't see what the observer can see. Us watching the movie can often predict what's going to happen the next while we get some surprises, but we can predict what's going to happen a lot better than the people in the movie, which some of them seem really dense in the movie. And you wonder, well, how come this guy did this silly thing? Didn't he see that this person was really going to betray him? How come he didn't understand that? And so as an observer, we can see much better. And he says this is an important ingredient for to become a member of the new group of world servers, where we can actually be useful. So in other words, what separates the new group of world servers from average humanity is they can be tools in the hands of higher intelligence to actually move things forward. Whereas average humanity are like characters in a movie that the script is written and there's not much you can do to change the script for them, because they will act according to the script, and but the observer can act transcend the script. And so this is what we need to do. We need to transcend the script that everybody else is playing on. The new group of world servers might well be regarded as the outer ranks, he says, as a trained body of organized observers. So the hierarchy takes these new group of world servers, and he says they are like they have a certain amount of inner training that has transpired, and they're a group of, he says, trained observers. Now, the new group of world servers is divided into 3 different divisions. The first is what he calls the outer. These include disciples just seeking to live as souls in the world of daily affairs, and to understand the real significance of words to work without attachment. Now this first group, some of them sense who they are, and a lot of them don't sense who they are, but they all have a sense of purpose that is beyond normal. And these people are in all the different organizations of the earth. And there's 7 different groups of organizations based on, that's in harmony with the 7 rays. The first ray organizations are more political, and they deal with the power to govern, so to speak. And in the politics, I know it may be hard to believe when we look at the political world, we see people that are really dense on both sides of the political spectrum. We wonder, where is the light in politics, okay? But be assured that there are political plants of the composed of the new group of world servers in the political realms all over the planet. And what these people do is like I say, a lot of them don't know who they are, but they have a sense of what needs done politically, and they will do what they can to influence people around them. They may be next to somebody that's very powerful, and they may be consulting them, for instance, and they will tell them things, impressions that they feel is important. So there's a handful in positions of power. There's quite a number of them associated with those in positions of power, but these people will be giving advice and trying to move things toward the next step in evolution in the political world. And then we have education is the next, that's associated strongly with Ray 2. And in education, there's we have a lot of problems in education in the world, especially in the United States right now, that people are being dumbed down a lot. This was evidenced a lot, began by Jay Leno. He used to go out and ask questions to, many of them were college students, supposed to be the best and brightest. You know, they didn't know who the vice president was. They didn't know what the War of 18, what year the War of 1812 was fought, and they didn't know who we fought in World War II. I mean, it was frustrating that how the education was lacking, and so the new group of world servers that are involved in education will be trying to get us back on the right track. It's probably in education, it's difficult to see where there's a lot of light being shined. But there's one guy that really impressed me as a world server, was the guy that established the Khan Academy. And have you heard of that, Jill? You're an educator. Have you heard of the Khan Academy?
Yes, I have, JJ. Yeah, I have.
Have you checked that out? He's what do you think of him?
I think that he's built the academy on sound educational practice, and that's a good thing. I mean, it's not a fly by night thing, and there's some really sound practices to it. Especially, I think it's especially effective for students who need more of a one-on-one rather than a classroom setting. There are classroom settings, but they're very, very small groups.
Yeah, it's really good supplementary for us. So if the student is kind of stumbling in math or something, he can go on the internet to the Khan Academy and take these lessons. Now, it does take initiative from the students to do that, but for
That's
students
true.
with initiative, this really fills in a lot of gaps for them, and you can learn just about anything you want.
And I
Uh,
think that online aspect of it came later. When it first was born, it was in person, kind of um, physical places, but it's really branched out once he went online with it.
Yeah. Now, do you see any other enlightening efforts in the educational system since you've been a teacher, right?
Yeah.
And do you see anything positive developments happening that are encouraging to you?
Well, not exactly. I've been out of teaching for about 10 years, and in those 10 years, it's really, really changed a lot. Um, you know,
For the worse or better?
I think for the worse.
Yeah.
The whole education system has gotten to be a political, a political kind of plaything, if you will. And results are more data driven than student driven. That's very bad and dangerous, in my opinion.
Yeah, I see in the educational, like say in the last generation, it seems like there hasn't been enough lights adding stimulation to our educational system. It's it's deteriorated, but everything goes in cycles. Things get so bad, and then all of a sudden people say, "Hey, we need to do something," and maybe we're at that point
It
now.
seems like one of the bright things coming about is in the last 10 years or so, they're introducing children to meditation and yoga. And that's one of the bright things that I think that's coming about through the education system, becoming
Yeah,
a curriculum in
yeah, that could
schools.
be good. Okay. Anybody else see any thing positive and negative in the educational system that they want to comment on? Yeah, I think this is a dire need. It's become too politicized, and they're not focusing enough on teaching correct information. Instead, they're focusing on politically correct information, which is, and also in the educational system, they're not allowing students to speak up and discuss things not in harmony with what the system wants to be taught. So they're not allowing enough debate either. We need a lot more debate and questions asked in our educational system. But on the other hand, because of the internet, there is a lot of information available for free. Now, even somebody in a third world country that has very little money, many of them are connected to the internet. And if a student is enterprising, he can educate himself through the internet. And that produces opportunity for those handful of people that are self-learners out there. So a self-learner has more available now than he's ever had. But if a person isn't a self-learner and is just depending on the system to educate him, he's going to be missing out a lot. But for the self-learners, for the people that are self-motivated, uh, the educational possibilities are better than they've ever been. So that's probably a positive note. But hopefully more people will surface in the educational system. I think I think the new group of world servers, a lot of them are going in other directions right now. Okay, the third ray is materializes a lot in economics and banking. Anybody see much light going on there? Well, at least in the United States right now, the economic situation is better than it's been for a while. Uh, so somebody must be doing something right. But on the other hand, we have a uh, uh, national debt that's completely out of this world that has to be taken under control, or uh, we could have a tremendous collapse. And if the economy of the United States collapses, the whole world would be affected. You know, the whole world would be in chaos. So this needs to be avoided. And there are a handful of people working on that. But every time, the trouble is to take this debt under control, there has to be certain cuts. We just can't have free stuff for everybody forever, or we will eventually have uh, uh, complete collapse. We have to, just like a family, in a family, if you want to buy a new car, you don't want to just go buy it on a credit card. You want to buy it when on a plan where you can actually make the payments in a logical way. And if you can't, then you just delay buying the new car, and you keep the old car for a while longer. And that's the way you do as a family. But in our nation, people think, well, we have unlimited money, let's just borrow some more and we'll just get whatever we want. And as we this attitude has to be changed around. And the the third ray also governs what the Tibetan calls the law of economy. And the law of economy says that that uh, the third ray influences things so everything operates in the most efficient way possible. For instance, just think of what you're going to do today. You think, well, I'll do A, B, and C, and you place the order in your mind in a way that you can accomplish the greatest amount with minimal expenditure of effort. That's the law of economy. And we're violating the law of economy by just all this borrowing we're doing so that we can get stuff. That's a violation of the law. And the new group of world servers will be in harmony with the law of economy. They will be giving advice saying, hey, we have to get our budget and spending under control so we can have an efficient economic system. Now, in business, the the law of economy works pretty good. A lot of businesses, there's a handful of businesses that go under because they violate this law of economy, and they spend a lot more than they take in. But most businesses eventually learn the lesson that they have to operate within their means and in a practical way in order to make the business succeed. So you have a lot of you have a lot of new group of world servers in the economic world, uh, but as far as it applies to government, we need more of them in there giving advice. Uh, I think quite a few of them are involved in uh, businesses overall, though, because businesses is the connected also to the seventh ray, which governs the age of Aquarius. And so enlightened business that's works in harmony uh, with higher will and the new age will do much to bring in the ingredients of the new age we're looking for. Okay, any comments on that before we move on? Okay, the arts. Okay, the arts would include music, theater, movies, um, uh, art, this type of thing. Can you, can you think of maybe one of the new group of world servers that is in this department? Or do you think everybody, all the celebrities out
According,
there are just into their own egos?
according to some of the writings of William Meader from the Theosophical Society, he says that we are the new group of world servers. Us, this group here, and us people who are thinking this way towards humanity, we are that group,
Yeah,
and that we should apply our different things that we know uh, and bring our light to and follow this path to help us because we are indeed this group of new world servers.
yeah, okay. Well, I can think of two instances where uh, the plan was furthered through the arts was Star Trek and Star Wars. Gene Roddenberry and George Lucas introduced concepts in these movies that kind of foreshadow where human evolution is going. For instance, in Star Trek, they had uh, race wasn't being separated by race was not a big deal, and they focused on a what they call the confederation of systems where different all kinds of different societies cooperated to explore the universe and so on. And that was a great concept that they introduced. And then of course Star Wars introduced the Force, which is really a symbol of the power of the higher self. And so uh, that's interesting. Then there's every once in a while there's some interesting concepts that's introduced. Just maybe just something like movies about relationships and how relationships can lead to further uh, happiness for people. I mean, that's a positive thing. Now there's a lot of negative stuff out there, the horror movies and stuff, but uh, there's also some positive things that develop in the media and the arts. Um, so there's good and bad out there, but there are servers out there that sense what should be created to kind of give us a feeling of the next step ahead. Now, if anyone wants that series on that Messiah on Netflix, that was an interesting idea that might have been inspired by one of the new group of world servers too. Yeah, somebody else.
Yeah, that's kind of the department I work in. I'm always trying to paint a picture that makes it easier, or diagram or whatnot, illustrate to make it easier for somebody else to understand, because basically image is what we use to create with. And if I can give somebody like if you're trying to think of all the different things you have to remember, like a friend of mine just started a Bible study, which means he's going to be on the phone with me till late at night asking questions, and I tell him, he's like, well, look at the picture this way. What all of this talk in the Bible class or whatever it's about is, it all boils down to what is the principle that this particular book in the Bible or chapter is trying to illustrate to you.
Yeah.
And that's what my specialty is. If people don't get it, I'll draw them a picture that explains it all in just one flash, you know, oh, I get it now, you know.
Yeah, well, good, good. Okay, the next is the Ray 5, and associated with that is science. So where are the new group of world servers in science? Orthodox science seems to not be manifesting geniuses like happened in the past. You know, you go back to the early part of the 20th century to up to about 1960, there were some very intelligent, innovative scientific thinkers, from Edison to Tesla to Gamow to all kinds of great thinkers. And but we had it. It seems like these intelligences come in waves, like music in the 50s and 60s completely altered the music world, and the music world just kind of floated along, and then all of a sudden we had rock and roll show up, and it just completely changed it, and we had some of the greatest musical talent that's ever been on the earth show up in the 50s, 60s, and 70s, in my opinion. Okay, and then kind of just leveled off. And the same with science. We had them show up with, beginning with around the time that Einstein showed up, and up to about 1960 we had, and they also developed the atomic bomb and all these theories, and the great advances that happened because of this intense wave of intelligence that manifested in science. And now regular science, where's a mind like Einstein or a Tesla or a Newton that's really coming up with things that are challenging scientific thought? You know, you just don't see it. Everybody just goes along with fine tuning what is. But I think where it's happening is kind of associated with business, whereas like uh, uh, the innovation in computers and the Tesla company and these Amazon seeking and these other companies seeking to create rockets that can send us to the moon and the Mars. And this is where some of the scientific ingenuity is manifesting itself. But as far as just developing regular theory and pure science, we're not seeing the innovations there as much as applying them to practical uses in science and spaceflight and things like this. We're going to see some tremendous innovations that's going to take us to the moon and Mars and beyond. And this is where some of the great minds are going to be manifesting. Okay, any more comment on that?
Yeah, I think the new frontier is going towards artificial intelligence. That's what's going to open up.
Yeah, that'll be a big one. That'll be a big one. That'll be one we'll really need to get on top of to control, or else they could wind up being the new species that dominates. Okay, the sixth ray manifests as religion and spiritual thinking, metaphysics, things like this. And where are the lights in the spiritual world right now, do you think? You think send the born again religion, or metaphysical groups on the internet, or where are the great lights?
I think it's more of a
I think
secondary wave coming right now, and the fact is that there's a more esoteric sense and more emphasis on wisdom.
Yeah, yeah. We're the second ray is is more powerful right now, and the sixth ray is passing out. The sixth ray governs idealism, and religion focuses on what the ideal good is, and that's what they preach about. But religion per se covers more than the sixth ray in the fact that it covers all types of spirituality. And there's a lot of inspired people on the planet that are trying to teach about unification, soul contact, uh, revelation, contacting God, fulfilling the will of God, and so on. But there's a lot of just unenlightened material out there and there's also a lot of deceptive material, a lot of channeling out there that just is pretty much pure nonsense. And then there's a handful of things that are pretty good. The Tibetan kind of gives it a 90-10 grade in his mind. He says when you look at all the supposed revelations out there, he says around 10% or so has reasonable value. And okay, any more comment on where to find light in the spiritual world?
I find that science, I keep coming across science articles and videos and whatnot that are bringing in the spirituality. They're talking about this latest scientific thing is the spiritual or the divine matrix. It's like divine matrix. That's about as far as you can get. I mean, that's like saying, and how does God work scientifically?
Yeah.
And they're actually, the scientists are approaching the subject. And it's like, wow, this never would have thought this 30 years ago, that science would lead the way to finding God.
Yeah, well, that's one of the DK's prophecies, is that science will eventually discover how to communicate with the afterlife, people that are dead. And he says when this happens, it's going to completely revolutionize thinking. But Edison had that idea. He was working on it at the time he died, of developing a device that could communicate with the spirit world. But unfortunately, he wasn't able to consummate his invention there. Now, the seventh ray governs business, organizations, lodges. And so this is an important one because the seventh ray is coming into power, and it will be a strong governing force of the new age for the next 1,000 or so years. And so what's interesting about business is really demonized a lot by a lot of people that claim to be spiritual leaders. They demonize business and say as if it's evil and it shouldn't even hardly exist. But business will be an important ingredient in bringing in the new age, but it will not be a business just a dog eat dog type situation. Business will turn from being extremely competitive to more cooperative, and we see that happening all the time. One of the evolutions of businesses that's taking place is where the employees have ownership of the company. The most successful grocery chain in the area where I am is called Winco, and it's employee owned, and they have a lot lower prices than other stores because they follow what the Tibetan calls the law of economy in such a way that they're very, very efficient. And so this employee ownership will increase as the new age goes along, and as the employees seek to make the business benefit the whole rather than just the people at the top, then we will have business evolved to where it's much more benevolent than the businesses in the past that have been pretty much demonized by society. Okay, any other comment on that?
Well, the economy of the new age is about energy, force, and substance. And business is a very important part of that.
Yeah. Yeah, you know, people, you look at what people demonize the most, and it's often what we're supposed to focus on, and it's often that thing which is designed to benefit us the most. In other words, humanity kind of kicks itself in the foot sometimes in the fact that it complains and it puts roadblocks in the way of the 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 point where it's supposed to make the greatest progression. And so people grumble about business and large corporations and all this all the time as if they're the worst things in the world, but these are the things that are eventually going to evolve to the point to where they can be a benevolent source. After all, without business, we wouldn't have an economy. Without an economy, we wouldn't have a civilization. So it's important, instead of seeking to destroy business, to improve it and make it work so it becomes a benevolent tool in the hands of the workers of the world. Okay, it says through these, the new group of world servers try and influence the thinkers and leaders of the world. And they may not, like I say, the new group, this first category of new group of world servers, some of them will sense who they are and some of them don't, but they all sense a feeling that they're picking up something and they want to take that something and make the world a better place. He says there are three different threads running through history. The first is, he says, the forms of all life change and adapt to meet the needs of humanity. That's one of the threads that we see. And as you look over history, we can see how that has happened. We have problems, we make changes, we adapt. There's more problems, and we keep fine-tuning things, and we can see this happening in history. He says the second thing, he says, as we look through history, we can see consciousness is evolving to reach the stage of the intuition and above. So that's another thing that we can look to see the work of spirit happening among humanity, is we see the consciousness evolving. Just read about how people thought about things a couple hundred years ago compared to today, and we can see that, you know, there's problems still with consciousness of many people, but overall we we are developing a higher consciousness. One of the ways this is most obvious is we are much more concerned about the welfare of humanity as a whole than we used to be. Used to be a lot more every man, woman, and child for themselves. Now we think, well, we feel sorry for those people in the third world countries, or we feel sorry for people having problems as we want to do something for them. This type of thinking this is a symbol of the evolution of our consciousness. So we should take heart in that. The third thing he says, we are evolving toward understanding the plan or the mind of God. We sense that there is a plan, but only a few are aware of what it is. A study of history will reveal the details of the evolving plan. And he makes an interesting statement that even the hierarchy only sees the plan clearly for about 200 years in the future. He says beyond that, they can kind of see cycles and how cycles are going to evolve. But the hierarchy itself can only see fairly clearly for about 200 years. Now, the important thing for people like us to understand is the next step in the plan, to sense what it is. Now, he doesn't really say what the next step is in the plan, but the reason he doesn't say it is because we just talked about the 7 categories. If the new group of world servers is in, say, education or science, it's a little bit different in each one of these. So he can't really say the next step in the plan is, and just identify it in a few words. The plan is quite complex, but overall, the next step is taking us to peace on earth, goodwill to humankind. That's where the next step is leading us. And but in wherever we are in life, our part of making that happen will be different for each individual and each group. So we need to focus on that next step, wherever it is. And to get that next step, the person has to pick up what he his part of the plan is to be. Okay, any comment on that before we move on?
Yeah, I think we are taking our next step.
Yeah,
I think we're taking it
we're trying to
by
do it right here, right now, right?
doing it right here, right now. We got 17 souls that are interested in group fusion and learning and spreading the light. And you know, we're doing it. We're doing things today that we've never done before. We've never had this group together before, and we're all interested in taking the light out into the world. Um, you know,
Yeah.
people are becoming more global conscious, more ecologically conscious, more animal conscious. Look at how people today respond to the abuse of animals. I mean, it's amazing the steps that we've taken over the last 50 years. So I think we're taking our next step, and I think we're conscious of it and we're aware of it.
Yeah, and the internet is providing a tremendous tool. Like just a few years ago, this was a dream to be able to meet together and talk like we're all in one room right now, but even though we're in different parts of the world. So this is really a great thing, and there are a number of, who knows how many groups are out there just
Hundreds.
trying to discuss ideas as to how to make the world a better place, just because of the connection through the internet. So this is a great tool to give us encouragement. He says, let them take heart as they recognize the fact that the kingdom of souls is steadily becoming a physical plane phenomenon and will be known eventually as a kingdom of nature and considered by the scientists before 2 centuries have passed away. So he says actual scientists will actually recognize soul contact, and that there is such a thing as a higher self, and there is a linkage that can be made. Within 200 years, he says, science will actually
I think they're already
acknowledge
admitting
it.
to that, DJ. I think they've
Well, they're
already
kind of
admitted
on that
science is
when quantum mechanics and
quantum
everything
theory.
is really making them think about the spiritual essence. They're still trying to explain it completely mechanically, but it's really making them think. He says this new group of world servers works in many fields of human awareness. They're distinguished by a non-sectarian spirit, by the ability to deal with foundational essentials, and to link up with varying departments of human investigation into one organized and unified whole. Now, this is the first group, subgroup. He says the new group of world servers has 3 divisions. This is the first division that we've talked about, is people that are developing higher consciousness and sense higher will. Most of them don't realize who they are. Some of them don't even consider themselves religious or spiritual, but they really want to benefit humanity and go by the highest they know. Next week, we'll talk about the second and third groups, subgroups of the new group of world servers. So before we sign off, any comments or questions on what we've talked about so far? Well, Ed, you always got something to say. What you got to say for yourself?
Well, I've got to say that we have to be an observer, and that's one of the important things. But we have to recognize that we are the world. We are the consciousness of the planet, and everything that we read about passes through our screen of vision.
Yeah. The observer. That's really an important point to contemplate on, to be dispassionate. And when we look at the political world, people that are completely without bias are really hard to find. When you look at these cable TV shows and they're interviewing political people, I mean, they're either biased one way or another. And finding people that are dispassionate, there's not too many of them out there. And even the ones that are, you find somebody that is dispassionate, they'll be accused of being biased. So recognizing the person without bias is also takes, the person has to have the viewpoint of the observer to even do that. Or maybe somebody that's completely without bias seems biased because of our own bias. So it's really difficult to pinpoint the points of truth to the average humanity out there. They have a hard time absorbing where the real midway point of truth is. It's hard for average people to see. And okay, any other comments or questions before we sign off?
Well, it's like a fish doesn't know there's water when it's all around us. And some people say the last thing we discover is air.
Yeah.
These truths are all around us. We just have to take away our screens and get rid of our opinions about things.
Right. And for some fish to teach other fish, there's other things. There's air out there that could be breathed. If you jump above the water, the regular fish probably wouldn't believe that was possible.
You know, in the channel between Long Beach and Catalina in California, there's flying fish. And I think of these flying fish as an evolution of the fish kingdom, because they want to come out into the air and see what the rest of the world's like.
Yeah. Yeah, you think of a fish that jumps, it's probably feels like it's kind of jumping toward the light. Kind of like us. We have to be like the jumping fish and jump up and breathe the intelligence of higher spirit and soul contact, and then we come back down and we can share it with our fellow men and women. Okay, real good point. Anything else?
You have to seek before you find.
Yep. Well, it's good to have everybody here, and appreciate your support, and we will see you, all being well, next Sunday at 2 p.m. Mountain Standard Time. And until then, have a good week.
Thank you so much, JJ.
Thanks.
Bye, everybody.
Thank you.
That's
All right. Thank you
Yeah.
so much.
baby.
Yeah, we'll be posting this shortly.
Bye-bye.
Yeah.